I never imagined I'd feel so belittled at my own sister's engagement celebration. The glow was soft, the expressions practiced, and her tone rang out clearly when she giggled and mentioned I was merely clerical staff at the judicial building. Guests smirked politely. A glass was tapped lightly. My throat tightened, yet I remained silent as usual. Then her fiancé shifted toward me, examining my features as if they'd registered somewhere in his mind before. "So what is it you really handle?" he inquired. I offered no elaboration. I offered no justification. I uttered a single term, and what followed wasn't noisy, theatrical, or chaotic, but it altered how my relatives viewed me permanently. My name is Verity, and for as long as I recall, my relatives have favored tidy categories, the sort you can mention swiftly over meals, the sort that avoid further inquiries. My sister Evelyn had always been the standout one. Driven, magnetic, the type who could enter a space and draw everyone toward her. And me, I was the reserved one, the dependable one, the one employed at the judicial building. That description trailed me constantly. Holiday gatherings, celebration suppers, offhand chats with kin who hadn't visited in ages. "So you're still handling clerical duties?" they'd inquire, grinning as if showing sympathy. I'd agree. Yes, still at it, and the topic would shift. What they overlooked was how skillfully I'd mastered blending into the background among them. Not out of embarrassment, but because whenever I attempted to clarify, their gazes grew distant. I discovered young that my achievements unsettled folks, particularly Evelyn. So I muted my descriptions, smoothed the corners, allowed them to accept the diminished image of me since it maintained harmony. At family events, the routine stayed fixed. Evelyn spoke. All attended. My parents inclined forward when she discussed her career, her achievements, her intentions. When I contributed, utensils scraped dishes. Someone grabbed another pour of wine. It wasn't malice, it was routine, and routines are tough to alter. There was just one individual who ever regarded me otherwise, my cousin Lily. She observed the extended evenings, the posture I held, the manner my device alerted at unusual times. She understood the reality, even though I never voiced it directly. Occasionally, she'd press my palm beneath the table, as if assuring me I wasn't unseen universally. I convinced myself I didn't require approval from my relatives. I convinced myself their views were irrelevant, but that was only partly accurate, because each instance Evelyn chuckled about my judicial building role, an ache built within me. Not rage, not quite. Something subtler, something denser. By the arrival of her engagement celebration, I already anticipated the evening's flow. I'd show up promptly. I'd assist wherever required. I'd grin during introductions. I'd depart before anyone registered my absence. I didn't anticipate admiration. I didn't anticipate interest. What I didn't anticipate was being pinned by an inquiry that wouldn't permit the falsehood to endure another instant. The engagement celebration was precisely what you'd envision from Evelyn. Flawlessly arranged, extravagant, and meticulously crafted to dazzle. Fairy lights draped the garden like an artificial dusk, pale blooms abundant. A sign with their initials suspended so prominently, it seemed to oversee us. I showed up promptly because that's my habit. Before I could place my bag aside, my mom passed me a pile of serviettes and gestured to the beverage station. "Could you manage that area?" she stated, already pivoting. No direct gaze, no inflection of query. By the time attendees began arriving, I'd already replenished ice buckets twice and cleaned a surface nobody had touched yet. I assured myself it was acceptable. I was accustomed to this position. Helpful, unobtrusive, aside from notice. Then Evelyn appeared. She emerged from the vehicle, radiant ring capturing the gleam as though equipped with its own beam. Crowds formed around her immediately. Praises soared. Flashes sparked. Her fiancé, Daniel, trailed nearby, refined, composed, beaming. Like an individual who mastered commanding attention without effort. He greeted palms, expressed gratitude, absorbed more than he contributed. Initially, he scarcely noticed me. Evelyn ensured all learned of his accomplishments, major victories, substantial fees, impressive figures that sounded grand but merged indistinctly soon after. My parents glowed as if they'd contributed. I lingered at the group's periphery, flute untouched, observing the familiar narrative I'd witnessed throughout my life unfold once more. Then Evelyn spotted me. "Join us," she beckoned, motioning me nearer like a secondary thought. I believe not everyone has encountered my sister. She looped an arm over my shoulder and beamed broadly. "This is Verity. She serves at the judicial building." A few courteous acknowledgments, faint curiosity, she's basically clerical. Evelyn inserted, chuckling, maintains order, handles calls. "You understand the drill," someone smirked. Another grinned as if that clarified all. I sensed the known warmth climb in my throat. The habitual urge surged to ease it, to remain mute, to allow it to fade. I gazed at my flute and drew a deliberate inhale. This wasn't novel. This was merely amplified. But Daniel didn't smirk. He was observing me truly now, genuinely observing. His beam diminished subtly. His gaze probed my features as if scanning recollections that didn't fully align. I noted the instant of doubt, the halt that felt out of place. Supper was declared and we proceeded to seats. I claimed a spot near the far side, precisely as anticipated. Speeches were delivered. Evelyn absorbed them fully. Then she lifted her flute anew. "Certain folks handle critical matters," she remarked, gesturing to Daniel. "And certain folks manage calls. Isn't that so, Verity?" Her gaze darted to me, challenging response. That's when Daniel pivoted completely in his seat and fixed his eyes on me. "Hold on," he murmured deliberately. "Verity, what precisely is your role at the judicial building?" The gathering stilled. Every gaze turned my way. And abruptly, there was no space remaining for the falsehood to conceal itself. For an instant, nobody uttered a sound. Not from courtesy, but because the inquiry disrupted the expected flow. It lingered there, uneasy, and revealed like a cable yanked free from the fixture. I sensed every stare upon me, felt the burden of decades compressing my frame. I didn't respond immediately. I glanced at my palms positioned on the surface. One thumb circled the flute's edge. The surface under my touch was chilled, firm, tangible. I could detect the subtle buzz of the garden lamps, the distant rattle of platters from inside, existence persisting even as something subtly fractured. In that interlude, countless minor instances flooded back. Every festivity where I'd been tasked with preparation. Every supper where my profession was condensed into one term that eased others. Every occasion I'd selected muteness, because it appeared simpler than observing letdown cross my parents' expressions. I recalled lingering in my residence deep into night, footwear still worn, reviewing documents, readying for yet another extended shift, aware none would ever surface at gatherings. I grasped something then. I hadn't been shielding them by remaining mute. I'd been shielding the image of me they favored, the reduced one, the one who didn't disrupt anyone's satisfaction. Opposite me, Evelyn was beaming excessively. Her chin was tense, gaze keen, as if detecting the change even without comprehending it fully. My mother fixated on her dish. My father grasped his flute and halted midway, uncertain. Daniel continued observing me, not rushed, not derisive, simply awaiting. The former urge instructed me to dilute it, to offer something ambiguous to preserve harmony once more. But another sensation emerged serene and firm, not fury, not retribution, lucidity. If I voiced now, the reality would settle. If I held mute, the falsehood would persist thriving, and I would continue diminishing to accommodate it. I comprehended then that this wasn't about shaming my sister or demonstrating to a gathering of folks who'd never genuinely inquired. It was about declining to vanish further. I adjusted posture subtly in my seat, placed my flute aside. The noise was minor, but it pierced the hush. My pulse decelerated. The apprehension I'd borne for years eased its hold sufficiently. I regarded Daniel initially, then my parents, then ultimately Evelyn, and I recognized whatever ensued return to prior self was impossible. I didn't elevate my tone. I didn't beam. I didn't elaborate. I uttered one term, "Juh." It arrived gently, nearly courteously, but the impact was instant. The atmosphere altered, not theatrically, no exclamations, no outbursts, but as if someone had muted the world's ambient sound. Discussions halted mid-phrase. Utensils hovered en route to lips. Even the fairy lights appeared to buzz more prominently in the abrupt quiet. For a moment, nobody stirred. My mother's complexion paled so rapidly it surprised me. Her mouth parted, then sealed, like seeking a phrase she'd never practiced. My father blinked sharply, his grip firming on his flute before positioning it carefully as though it risked breaking otherwise. Evelyn chuckled. It emerged harsh and fragile. "Oh my God," she uttered, gesturing dismissively, hilarious. I didn't regard her. I maintained focus on Daniel. He hadn't chuckled. He hadn't shifted. His demeanor had transformed in a manner I identified immediately. Not bewilderment, not irritation, but awareness finally aligning. He reclined gradually, scrutinizing me as if reconstructing a recollection fragment by fragment. "Judge," he echoed softly. Then his gaze broadened slightly. "Verity Cole," he stated. "The judicial building in the city center nobody inhaled. You oversaw my matter last year," he continued, "the one involving the business conflict. I appeared before you repeatedly. The hush intensified, profound and irrefutable now. Evelyn's beam solidified. "What are you discussing?" she demanded, facing him. "She handles clerical, she manages calls. You've encountered her perhaps twice." Daniel didn't regard her. "I recognize clerical appearances," he remarked steadily. "And I recognize judicial appearances." He returned gaze to me. "You were equitable, straightforward. You avoided showmanship, you attended. That's why it stuck." My father eventually located his tone. "You're a judge," he queried, incredulity dense in his voice. "Since when?" 3 years, I responded evenly. My mother shook her head as though the term lacked meaning. "But you mentioned you were supporting someone." "You mentioned I was," I answered. "Initially. Nobody inquired afterward. That was when it struck them. Not instantly, but gradually, achingly. The awareness that the narrative they'd echoed for years hadn't been amended. Not because accurate, but because suitable. Because it didn't upset the equilibrium they knew." Evelyn shifted her seat backward subtly, gaze flicking among expressions. "This is absurd," she stated. "You permitted all to assume you were clerical. Who behaves that way?" I held her stare for the initial time. "I didn't deceive," I replied. "I ceased amending you." Her complexion reddened. "You orchestrated this deliberately," she accused. "You held off until my engagement celebration to humiliate me." I shook my head. "You humiliated yourself." I responded to an inquiry you posed before everyone. She pivoted to Daniel, her tone escalating. You knew she was a judge and withheld from me I didn't know," he replied. "I never linked Judge Cole to your sister. You never shared her surname. You never allowed her voice." That struck more profoundly than my possible words. Around the gathering, responses spread outward. My uncle fixated on his palms, murmuring indistinctly. My grandmother extended across the surface and pressed my forearm softly, as though she'd anticipated this longer than most. I always sensed, she murmured gently. "You held yourself uniquely." Evelyn rose so suddenly, her seat grated against the stone terrace, the noise cutting the calm. "This is my evening," she declared, her tone quivering now. "And you've destroyed it. You always manage this. You always discover means to center yourself." I remained seated. I offered no response. I responded tranquilly until you derided me, until you diminished me to amusement before your fiancé and our relatives. That wasn't inadvertent. That was deliberate. Her mouth parted, then sealed. For the initial time, she lacked a quick retort. Daniel rose gradually. "Evelyn," he stated cautiously, "the manner you addressed her," she interrupted him. "Stop, you're meant to support me." "I'm supporting accuracy," he replied. "And I can't overlook it now, how you addressed your own sister like that." That was the instant it fractured, not clamorously, not violently, but thoroughly. Evelyn surveyed the gathering and grasped the focus had realigned. The command she'd always held wasn't hers presently. Nobody smirked. Nobody protected her. Even my parents remained immobile, trapped between the daughter they'd perpetually lauded and the one they'd never fully perceived. "This is incredible," she murmured. "You believe you're superior now?" I shook my head. "No, I believe I finally halted feigning inferiority." She fixated on me for a prolonged moment, something vulnerable and alarmed flashing behind her fury. Then she pivoted and entered indoors, footsteps echoing like final marks concluding a statement. Daniel paused, regarded me. There was turmoil in his gaze, but also admiration. "I must speak with her," he murmured quietly. I agreed. After they departed, the gathering remained hushed. Beverages warmed, dishes remained intact. My mother eventually grasped my palm. "Why didn't you inform us?" she queried, her tone diminished. I didn't withdraw because each attempt to be recognized, I stated, "You averted gaze." Nobody contested that. And in that calm, I sensed something novel settle in my throat, not victory ease. Like I'd finally released a burden I'd hauled for years and recognized no need to reclaim it. The following morning, I awoke to a silent device and an odd sense of serenity. No anxiety, no reliving the evening mentally, just daylight through the shades and the constant pulse of the urban area beyond my pain. Then the notifications began arriving. Overlooked calls, extended messages, brief regrets that seemed awkward yet genuine. Kin who abruptly sought updates. My parents left 2 recordings. I heard neither. Around noon, there was a rap at my entrance. It was Daniel. He appeared weary, like someone who'd lacked rest but reflected deeply. We positioned at opposing sides of my sofa, brews cooling among us. He offered no justifications. He offered no protection for her. "I can't unobserve it now," he stated. "The manner she addressed you, the manner all permitted it." I agreed. There wasn't more to contribute. "I don't know what this implies for us yet," he confessed, "but I know I can't disregard it." When he departed, the residence felt brighter, not vacant, just truthful. A few days on, Evelyn arrived without notice. No cosmetics, locks tied back, the rendition of her that never surfaced at kin events. We didn't embrace. We didn't argue. I was frightened, she stated eventually, of being average, of ranking lower. I accepted her. "I'm not here to rival," I informed her. "I never intended to." She agreed gradually, as if absorbing that initially. We weren't abruptly intimate. Nothing resolved instantly, but something had transformed. My parents began posing inquiries and genuinely awaiting responses. Lily beamed at me across supper surfaces, and for the initial time, I didn't sense the urge to justify myself whatsoever. I once believed remaining mute equated to compassion. I was mistaken. Muteness didn't safeguard anyone. It merely instructed others how minimally they could render me. The reality is, you don't owe others a diminished rendition of yourself merely to sustain calm. If you've ever experienced that concealing your progress so others remain at ease, you're not isolated. Post your experience in the replies, and if this connected with you, press follow. You merit being recognized.